Today we have with us Dr. Rehab Iftikhar. Thank you for joining with us. If you can give us a brief introduction about yourself and your educational background as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I did my BBA and MBA in Information Technology Management, and then I continued my further education and I moved to Sweden. I did my MSc in Management Sciences, and I applied for position. I got selected for a PhD in Management Sciences in Luis Juda University. And after completing my PhD, which is in crisis management, I moved to Pakistan and worked there as assistant professor. Then I got a really good opportunity to do further research, so I decided that I should continue with research track. So I joined Tampere University, and I worked there as a postdoc fellow for 2 years, and then I worked with UCL for a few months on a research project. And currently I'm working with the UWS, University of West of Scotland.
You have published around 16 research papers. Most of these research papers are around the topics of crisis management. Tell us a bit more why crisis management? What motivated you to get into the crisis management?
That's very interesting because it's more like a personal thing. In 2005, an earthquake struck Pakistan, and at that time I was a bachelor student. I was in a classroom, and it was very devastated. We saw on the news that what's happening, and I have seen a lot of relief, services and rehabilitation services. But I can see that there is a lot we can do. So my initial idea is that I should study disaster management. When I get the chance to be in Sweden for my MS, I discussed that idea with several professors. So I got a lot of good comments and appreciation for the topic, but I was not able to work on that. I at that time I worked a little bit on risk management. When I moved for my PhD, then that's the time that I decided I should work on crisis management. So the inspiration comes from that event, and I decided not disaster management, but let's move to the crisis management.
So today, the paper which I would like to discuss is with regards to the Islamabad Airport project. Tell us a bit more why Islamabad Airport project. What motivated you to look to this project?
So that's another interesting story. So, because as a PhD student, you need to collect data. I was in Pakistan and I get to know that there are certain projects, mega projects or interorganizational project, what we call. And then the next thing is these projects are very much in the media. If there are certain delays or something happening, everything is on the news channel. There are a lot of debates around that project, and that's the project we get a lot of attention because after several decades we have a new airport in Pakistan. That's why the project was in limelight. So when I look at the newspaper and looking at the news, I was like, oh, it's just interesting. Well, let's try to access that project, which took a lot of efforts to get the access.
The scale of the project and the longevity where it was put on paper, and eventually it was commissioned, it was quite a long period. When I was looking at the research paper, you collected a lot of empirical data as well. Tell us a bit more, what empirical data did you collected, and what kind of difficulties did you face?
Well, maybe we should discuss with the difficulty first. Collecting data from developing countries is a challenge because we don't have a research culture. You need to explain them that why you are coming there for interviews first. And mostly these projects are too much on media scrutiny. So they are trying to avoid people that are not working on those projects. So getting access to such projects are still difficult. Usually I prefer to conduct interviews. The reason being because my background is not from engineering. I'm a social scientist. So my background is in management sciences. So when I remember when I visited these project sites, they use very hardcore engineering terms and which I was not familiar with. So the good thing is that I asked them, I don't have a background in engineering, so if you could explain those things. And they were very kind, they explained everything. So I have now a little bit of understanding how engineering terms are working. So for this specific case, I conducted 35 interviews from 28 different participants, and these participants are from different stakeholders, including client, consultant, designers at different positions as well. And then during the interviews, I get the chance because I was on the field. So I requested if I could visit some of the field, how things are happening and have some observation. And they were very kind that they allow me. So I have 2, 3 site visits as well. And I saw that how things are happening because they were mentioning about the issues. But when you see things from your naked eyes, you can see how things are really happening and what is the problem. You can relate it better. And when we are dealing with the case studies, we usually have archival documents. We requested the stakeholders if they can provide some documents that could help us to build a good case and develop the understanding of the case. And I also search some reports on internet, so I find some public reports there as well. Plus, there are some newspaper articles that would come handy with.
You also made some comparables with the other airport projects as well. Why do you think that airport projects have this tendency that they are more prone to delays?
I believe that any project can face crisis, but the reason we think that airport projects are more prone to crisis is that we have some cases from the history, like Terminal 5 and the Denver airport, and they are very good projects with huge investment, huge efforts were put on those projects. The reason being with such projects, because there are so many components. So the airport is basically collection of several systems. So if one system is not working, you can't run the airport. So system integration is very important. For example, let's imagine if you have want to catch a flight, everything is working, but baggage handling system is not working. So you have an airport, but it's not on, it's not providing you the service it should. The airport project is a very complex project having so many systems, and if all those systems work together, then you can run the airport properly.
So you collected around 35 interviews, and in that 35 interviews, there were plenty of stakeholders. You started with the end customer, and then you got designers and like consultants and contractors, subcontractors. So tell us a bit more, like what was the organizational structure look like?
My main contact was the client, which is Civil Aviation Authority Pakistan. That's the authority which deal all the airports, running and operating all the airports. If we talk about the designing of this project, so the design comes from foreign-based firms. We have a Singaporean-based firm, and then we have French-based firms which design the airport. Then we have a UK-based consultant, which are basically providing project management consultant services, and we have main contractor, which are mostly foreign-based firms, Chinese, French, German. But this is local law that any foreign-based firm cannot work alone. They need to have a local organization engage with them. So they need to have joint venture. So the idea is that 70% work would go to the foreign firm and 30% work go to the Pakistani local firms.
In the paper, you have highlighted some interesting distinction between the definition of the risk and crisis. Tell us a bit more. How do you define crisis and risk?
Thank you for raising this point, because I struggle for that, and I think I still struggle to create that understanding. The first thing when I work on crisis management, that's the biggest challenge, that how you can differentiate with other concept like risk, unexpected events, or surprise, because they are considered almost similar. They are interchangeably used. My understanding is they are not. For me, risk is something that is foreseen, so it's like something that you can expect, you can identify that okay, it could happen, and you can plan for that, so you can have something to mitigate risk. When we talk about crisis, these are unforeseeable events. You can't identify them, you can't predict them, and they are low probability, high impact events. So if you can't identify an event, it's very hard that you can plan any contingency for that. So that's how you can differentiate between these two concepts.
You had like 17 different scope packages, and these 17 packages means 17 different contractors. This is something that I personally have also struggled in my experience as well, not with 17 but even with less than 5 as well. What kind of fragmentation happened when you got 17 different packages happening together?
Okay. The first thing is the organizational structural challenge. That's the poor organizational structure. Proper time was not given for the planning. As you mentioned, that if you have four contractors, it's very easy to explain and understand through meetings and discussion that what exactly they need and how you communicate. And it's easy to coordinate with four people, and rather than having 17 people, because each one comes with their own issues, and then it would be a mess. And then you have 17 contractor with number of subcontractors, so it's a huge issue there. We suggested that they should follow how they did in Terminal 5, Heathrow Terminal 5, that they have a major system. They divide into four major system, like they have systems, then they have rail and tunnels, and then they have infrastructure, which is air side and land side, and then they have buildings. And then within that, they divide the project into 16 major projects and then sub projects. So it's easy to communicate these four systems, and then these four systems will communicate to their sub projects. But now we don't have major system of Islamabad Airport. So we have 17, which means that we have to coordinate with each one of them. It's a very big challenge, which could be easily handled if they plan really well.
There were like 11 project leadership changes in the last 15 years. This like frequent changes, what impact did it had on the main contractors, subcontractors? What kind of difficulties they faced?
Just a small correction, it's 11 year and 15 changes. It's fine that if you change the leadership 2 or 3 times. I mean, people leave the projects. That's how projects are, and that leadership is changing from the client side. As a leader, each one have a different working style. If I'm leading a project, I have a different way of working. I have a different way of making decisions. Plus, it also means that how you prioritize the project. Sometimes you get verbal approvals, and you say, okay, we will put that in documents later. So just to make things quicker and finish things quickly, we should need to we should just go with the verbal approval, and then we will document it. But if a leader change, all the understanding will be gone with that person, and the next person will come. And then if you're changing 15 times, means that every person will come, spend 2 to 3 months to understand what has been done, and when that person is in position to make some decision, you will change that person. So then the next person will do the same. I'm not saying that you need to carry the bad leadership, but it doesn't mean that you have to change rapidly. That's why the one of the major reason is that the project delays and it linger on for 11 years, because the leadership is changing so much.
Is it mainly because of the extended duration of the project? The leadership were changing, there were political reasons. What was the underlying reason that the civil aviation decided to continuously change the leadership?
I think there are several reasons. Some of them are political. There is a malpractice happening on this project. So instead of looking at that it's really happening or not, they say, okay, just remove that person because they are bringing bad reputation to our project.
So there were few designer teams in France and Singapore which were supporting the team locally in Islamabad. What do you see that the impact of remote teams had?
I agree that the time when I was studying this project, the remote workings are not very common. But I agree that it's not possible for the designer to sit for 11 years in for completing the project. That's also not practical. But they should assign people, those who can make decisions on their behalf. So if there is any problem, any petty issue the contractor is was facing at that time, they have to inform the head office. Now these firms are in different countries, different regions, so there is a time difference. Then language difference. So they are taking their time. They're asking for more. Send us this details and those documents. And the contractor was like, okay, we have to stop the work. And in these projects, it's like if you stop a project for one day, it means a lot of money. And one of the contractor told me that I know that they don't respond, so I do that and tell them I have done this. So I finished this by doing, because I know that if I will communicate with them, they were asking more details and they are providing almost a similar solution which I will implement. So rather than waiting for that, because I have labor, I have to pay them and have resources there, I can't waste my resources. So I need to work, and then okay, this has happened and this is how I solve it.
You also found out that there was a malpractice and there were a few cases which were lodged as well. Tell us a bit more what really happened and why there was a need of the judicial intervention.
When we create the hype in media about such projects, and in developing countries, because we emerging economies, such projects means a lot because they are happening in decades. We don't have these projects every now, so these projects happen in decades. So when such project happened, considering the economy of the country as well, all the newspaper media firms start looking at that project get limelight, which they should get extra limelight, I would say, and they're in unnecessarily media scrutiny. So these kind of cases, some of the cases are genuine, definitely, but there are certain investigation which I feel are mostly could be prevented. There is no need for that. It slow down the project.
We have unpacked the project a lot. I want to also get some takeaways and the learnings from the paper as well. When you're dealing with subcontractors, customers, consultants, all in all, everybody wants to cross the finish line, right? But again, they will have their own goals, they have their own agendas, right? So PMs can we do to ensure that at least from a coordination point of view, all the parties are aligned?
I agree that each organization, each stakeholder, when engaged in a project, they have their goals. And as we use the term conflict of interest. But when we talk about a project, each stakeholder know that what is their role, how they have to perform their role, what kind of authority is coming with that role, and responsibility as well. So the goal for any stakeholder when they are engaged in the project is to deliver a quality performance within time and cost. And what we have to do, and as a stakeholder or even the project managers, that we need to acknowledge that if there is a crisis, we don't need to go into a denial stage. If we are acknowledging that okay, there is a crisis, the next step is let's have a discussion how we can minimize the impact of that crisis, what we can do so it would not impact the project. Because if you are delaying and not acknowledging the crisis, or in the state of mind that okay, it will never happen to us, and it will eventually, and then it's not possible to recover from that damage, so you're wasting a lot of resources there. So in that case would be that it's better to collaborate and be a bit open mind, respect the opinions of different organizations. Every organization definitely have different agendas and goals, but when we are in project, it's one goal that we have to deliver the project.
When the crisis hit, project managers go into the denial stage that everything is okay. What you highlighted very nicely in the paper is about the part where the contractors have a lot of emphasis on recording and not on the mitigation, right? Which is something I also get into the trap on daily basis, that something happens, all you do is just start writing all the events, bringing all the problems to the customer instead of having a proactive solution and working on the mitigation. Why do you think contractors have this sort of tendency?
It comes with the designated role and the authorities as well. So, do the contractors have the authority to respond to the crisis? If not, then they don't have any other option just to record the crisis. That's why we differentiate that okay, there are some controllable crises, there are some uncontrollable crises, and when you're dealing with uncontrollable crisis, you can't do much there because it's not in your control. Someone else has to fix it for you. But then another thing comes up that okay, if someone else comes and fix that issue, would they get the same would they give the same importance and urgency to that event or not? Because it's an issue for you that is hurting you, it might not be hurting any other contractor in the same project. So the importance or agency of the crisis is something that we need to focus on as well.
When the crisis hit, the project manager goes into the denial state. Then there is a stage where they start recording, and then you also mention about the mitigation, if it's controllable or uncontrollable crisis. But if I want to zoom out completely and say what kind of early warning signs I can see in order to detect that there is a crisis coming, if it's uncontrollable, something like COVID hits, this is not something that it's on a paper, right? But at least for the controllable crisis, what do you think would be an early warning sign the project managers can pick up and say, you know what, there is a wave coming and I need to have plan A, B, C ready?
I think we need to change our attitudes. As I mentioned, that it will never happen to us. It can actually, because we are living in an unpredictable world. So anything can happen. So saying that we planned the project very well, so this crisis or this event will not affect us is something not realistic. Then one thing we could do is that creating environment or culture where practitioners could engage with academics as well, because there is still a gap. So there is still a big gap between academia and industry. Having said that, I have studied so many projects, and I feel that the construction sector projects are very traditional projects. They are not very open to innovation and new ideas. They feel pride that okay, we are following the traditional mechanism, which is fine. But I think one point in time you need to change. You should be open to change, because change is the only constant and it's inevitable. You need to adopt the changes. A lot of organizations like pharmaceutical firms, they have R&D, so they suggest something and they definitely doing well. In construction, I've never seen such things. It's a high time that we should have something. Plus, one possibility is because there are a lot of projects are happening around, a lot of airport projects and other than airport infrastructure projects is happening all around. So one possibility is that practitioners should study those projects. Like as a reference case, if you're doing a project in Pakistan, then you can study projects from Pakistan, last 5 years or 10 years projects, and you can get some really good ideas from that. We should share the lesson learned. We can make mistakes. There is no shame in that you made a mistake and you basically did something to fix it. The problem is that we are so much still in a bubble that okay, we should not share our mistakes. We need to acknowledge them, and then we need to try to fix it.
Dr. Rehab, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I hope we have an opportunity to interact more on your remaining 15 papers as well, and more to come. Thank you very much again for the opportunity.